Okay, I have 15 minutes to cover material that I normally cover in 14 weeks. So Sonia suggested I have to talk very fast. I can't really do that, but I'll try to give you an overview. So this is my 15 minutes maybe of fame, or maybe of infamy, depending on how well I pull this off. Fortunately, Sandy's already raised some points that I was going to cover in the first couple of minutes. And the first point, just to summarize, is this is old hat. Forecasting has been going on, risk prediction has been going on since the 1920s in Pearl, and is now very widespread. It has, however, become increasingly actuarial and increasingly statistical, because those particular perspectives do better than judgmental decisions. On the other hand, judgmental decisions are really actuarial too. A judge sees an offender standing before him or her and says, oh, I've seen people like you before. You're a troublemaker, off you go to prison. Or you're a good risk, I think you're going to do well, off you go to probation. So the idea of doing risk assessments based on the collective experiences of individuals like the person who's being considered is not new. We're just doing it in a more technically powerful way than in the past. Another very important point of background is that these decisions are made by a particular individual, and the forecasts are meant to inform those decisions, not determine those decisions. This isn't lock and key. This is just another form of information, a more precise form of information than has been used in the past, but it is not definitive. And finally, and this comes up all the time, when you talk about these techniques, all kinds of objections can be raised based on the yardstick of perfection. Yup, these things aren't perfect. We make forecasting errors, for sure. The yardstick is current practice. The yardstick is whether we can do better than judges do now, or magistrates do now, or parole boards do now, or prison officials do now. We have to do better, we don't have to do perfect. And that's an important point of confusion that often comes up in the evaluation of these tools. Okay, here's machine learning in a picture. So I have this wild animal preserve. I have two endangered species, lion and buffalo, and I got to figure out a way of putting a fence between them so they don't kill each other. I don't know on scientific grounds where these individuals are. I don't have a theory of ecosystems which tells me exactly where to find the buffalo and exactly where to find the lions. There's no theory. So what do? I walk the terrain very carefully, no doubt, or I fly over the terrain and I look to see where these creatures are. And depending upon where I locate them, let's say in GPS metrics, I build a fence. That fence is located by longitude and latitude. There's nothing about, for example, the availability of water or the availability of tree cover or other prey or other creatures that might be serving as food. It's strictly done empirically. Now, once I have this fence, I hope I've done a pretty good job separating the two species. In the future, someone comes to me and says, where will I find the lions? I say, well, just look at the fence and go to the left. I don't know why they're there, but I'll tell you, you'll find lions there and you won't find buffalo. Or they say, where will I find the buffalo? I say, look at the fence, go to the right. That's where you'll find the buffalo. I don't know why they're there, but I guarantee you, you'll find buffalo there and you won't find lions. That's basically machine learning. We have algorithms that work with enormous amounts of data to put boundaries between different kinds of offenders. Those boundaries are not necessarily based on models or theory or subject matter knowledge, although those things can help for sure. Those models are based on a brute force effort to search through the data to find associations that work in the sense that they are highly accurate. And then in the future, once we have this information in hand, we can use that format for forecasting, and we forecast very, very well. That's basically what machine learning does. Of course, there are 15 weeks, 14 weeks of details on how the algorithms do that. But that's all they're really doing. These are just sophisticated search techniques, not informed by subject matter theory, but informed by the power of algorithms to find associations in the data. That's the whole game. This is another way of representing the process. We have some inputs. In the case of our nature preserve, longitude, latitude, maybe altitude. We have those as W, X, and Z. Those are just predictors in the usual sense we take that term. The computer takes those pulls them apart, rearranges them, transforms them into formats that allow for strong associations with the outcome. In machine learning, we allow for at least two kinds of outcomes: numeric, which we call Y, and groups or categorical, that we call G. Either work. There's a black box here because the algorithm doesn't tell us at the end exactly how these predictors are used. So machine learning cannot be confused with a model. We have no explanatory power. We know which variables are associated with which predictions. So for example, in criminal justice circumstances, we know that the age at which a person commits their first crime for which they're charged an adult is a powerful predictor. We don't know why. I mean, we can all speculate about why. But there's nothing in the machine learning algorithm which gives you the mechanism. It just says, if you know that fact, you're going to predict with substantially greater accuracy than if you don't know that fact. So it is a black box. And that is a concern that has been visible for a decade or more. We're working on it. We now have the ability to peek a little into the black box, but it's still essentially a black box algorithm. A problem that comes up in any kind of forecasting circumstances, I was talking to a few of my colleagues before the session today, is an acknowledgement that we're not only going to make forecasting errors, but not all errors are created equal. What machine learning allows one to do is to differentially weight the costs of different kinds of forecasting errors. So I have archetypes here. The judge is looking at a convicted offender and wondering, do I have before me a Darth Vader, or do I have a Luke Skywalker? Tough question. Clearly, I don't want to release the Darth Vaders, and they're going to destroy, the person will destroy several planets. On the other hand, I don't want to incarcerate Luke Skywalker because, after all, Luke Skywalker will defeat the Empire. Tough call for a judge. The judge has to make that call, however, and anticipate that the consequences of the mistakes, releasing Darth Vader, incarcerating Luke Skywalker, the consequences of those mistakes are different. And the relative costs are different as well. So it's very important that when the decision is made about what to do for this individual, that the differential costs of those mistakes get integrated into the forecasting procedure. That allows the forecasts to differ in contrast to when we treat those costs as the same. That in turn makes the forecast different. A person might be classified differently depending upon the relative cost of those two kinds of mistakes. It's a key feature of machine learning. It is not a key feature of conventional modeling, and in fact, a weakness of those models. And if you talk to anybody who uses this information, they'll readily agree, oh yeah, all mistakes are not created equal. I must have those somehow integrated into the forecast you give me. Machine learning actually does that quite effectively. Now, issues that come up in this. First issue that comes up, are we doing better than conventional practice with respect to accuracy? The answer to that is pretty clear, and it's yes. Mathematically, you can show it. Simulations, you can show it. Experience, you can show it. On the average, you do no worse than conventional methods. Typically, you do better, often much better. Transparency, well, that's partly in the eye of the beholder. Anybody who wants to look at the code that is used in these algorithms can have at it, and it's absolutely transparent what the code is doing. There's no mystery. No one's hiding the ball. Practicality, that's tougher. Typically, to implement these procedures, you have to be working in jurisdictions where the IT technology is pretty good. So it works pretty well in places like Philadelphia or Boston or Chicago or Los Angeles. It might not work so well in rural counties where the IT technology is not there, and the access to databases that you need is not readily available. And finally, fairness. That's a tough one too, but again, it's compared to what? No one is claiming that these algorithms are completely fair. I don't even know what that could mean, although there's actually some interesting statistical work on what that could mean. The point is whether it's more fair. Now, there are many dimensions to fairness as well. I'm sure we'll hear more about that throughout the discussion this morning. But the yardstick is, again, current practice. What judges currently do, what parole boards currently do, what probation officers currently do, what prisons currently do. Can we be more fair than that? And I think the answer is yes, but you may hear different opinions in the next 45 minutes or so.
I'm done. Can I just pull this, pull this, pull this?
Now, while Sonia's getting set up, can I ask you, Richard, in 2 or 3 minutes, could you just tell the audience a bit about your domestic violence forecasting pilot in Philadelphia?
Sure. We're working with a group in Philadelphia here that's engaged in reforming pretrial process. We just got a large grant from MacArthur, and the city is throwing in money as well. Among the problems that needs to be addressed is what happens at preliminary arraignments in domestic violence cases. Those cases often tend to involve serial crimes with the same offender and same victim, and those crimes can be pretty horrendous. So the idea is to provide information to help magistrates assess the risk of reoffense. Of course, we're also worried about FTAs, whether people fail to appear. But the immediate pressing problem is, do we dare release a given person or not, based on the possibility or the prospect, based on forecasting, they're going to commit a serious crime. So we worked using machine learning tools with a database of about 30,000 cases, and we're able to show that if you were to use, if the magistrates were to take seriously our forecasts, you'd cut the rearrest rate for domestic violence in Philadelphia in half. So it's a pretty substantial effect. We're now moving on to other applications, for example, for drug offenders and other special types of offenses, with the same goal, not to determine the outcome, but to allow magistrates to be better informed when they make those decisions. You all know those decisions are made in a matter of minutes, with very little information about the individual or the crime. There are seat-of-the-pants forecasts being made on the fly. Not surprisingly, we can do better than that.
Great, thank you so much.